Now up next is a girl who is half Mexican and a Mormon. And I learned so much else about her backstage, but I'm not going to tell you because I want to feel important. This is Jill Wagner!
First, I have to give you guys a little disclaimer. I actually have an ear infection, so you need to keep your expectations for my singing a little bit low. So think more like Russell Crowe and Les Mis than Hugh Jackman. So, all right, so my story. A lot of awesome things happened in the late 90s. As a lot of you can remember, gas was only 99 cents a gallon. Britney and Justin got together, and I spent a magical night with the principal. Now, lest you think that this story ends in an episode of Dateline, the principal was actually the nickname of our class president. He got that nickname from one of my friends because he always wore sports coats to school every single day. And he would always write awkward stuff in people's yearbooks like, "Let us together reach the apex of our educational aptitudes." And we're like, what? What kind of kid are you? But for weeks prior to that night, the principal had kept cornering me and saying, Jill, I really think you're a great girl. I think you deserve to go somewhere really special. I want to take you out to a fancy dinner. And that's how we ended up en route to the Olive Garden. Now, I'd never really been interested in the principal, but up to that point, my romantic life had pretty much consisted of doing drive-bys, my crush's house, and I was a little bit embarrassed to admit this, but I did a little informal survey of my GChat, and a lot of people did this in the 90s. Now, throughout history, teenagers have always stalked their crush, but back then we didn't have Facebook. So we had to put a lot of legwork in it, you know, like figure out your crush's dad's first name, look him up in the phone book, and then get all of your friends together, drive around, hope that you drive by that auspicious moment when your crush just happens to be like sitting in the front room like wearing a towel or something. And my mom even thought it was fun. So we'd just be driving in the van. We'd be driving in the van. I'm the oldest of 5. There'd be like kids in a booster chair in this minivan. And my mom would turn to me and be like, Jill, let's do some drive-bys. I'm like, all right, let's do it. She is a bored housewife. And my brothers would yell stuff out the window. I would hide under the seat. I would be so embarrassed, but it was a family activity. So I thought, well, it's either that or go out with the principal. Maybe I should try going out with the principal. So he tried to make up some icebreakers. His first one was, do you think your parents still have sex? And I'm like, no teenager wants to think of their parents, you know, in the act of love. And I started stammering, I don't know. I mean, they have 5 kids. I mean, there's a baby. And as I was trying to answer it, I felt his hand on the back of my head. And I thought, oh my gosh, all my romantic dreams are coming to fruition. But then he yelled, duck, and he pushed my head down underneath the window. And I thought, oh no, what happened? Someone threw a grenade at us from a strip mall. And there was no explosion. And after a second, I said, what's going on? And he said, yeah, my friends just drove by, and I didn't want them to see me with you. And I thought, all right, that's messed up in a lot of ways. But through the corner of my eye, I saw a minivan, and I was like, that's what I could be doing? Okay, I'm just not going to say anything. So we got to the Olive Garden, and he was charming again, and he was like, Jill, order anything you want in the whole world. I don't even care. So I'm like looking through the menu. I'm like, what's the most expensive thing? And it was like $11.99. It's called the Tour of Italy. I looked it up because I couldn't remember, but it's a delectable combination of lasagna, chicken parmesan, and fettuccine alfredo. And in retrospect, I realized that's why people who eat at strip malls look different than people who go to Whole Foods. But actually, I like eating at strip malls, but I thought you would laugh at that. So anyway, dinner was uneventful, and then until the check came. So the check comes, And of course he's gracious again. Jill, anything you want, I'm paying for this one. I'm like, yeah, you said you were. So he opens his wallet and looks, and his eyes start to shift, and he gets really nervous. And he said, oh, I cannot believe I did this. I let my mom borrow my credit card again. She always wants to buy stuff. And I was like, well, I'm 16. I don't have a credit card to loan my mom, so I don't know what we're going to do. And then he smiled and he said, oh, okay, I have a good idea. And he threw the keys at me, and it was heavy because it was like 2 keys and like 50 keychains, and it hit me in the arm. And he was like, go get the change out of my car. And I was like, what? Like nervous laugh. But I was like, all right, I might have a plan. So I took it, and as I was walking outside, I thought, what are the consequences for Grand Theft Auto? Because I might as well just ditch this guy. But then, I mean, I was a pretty straight-laced kid. A couple weeks before that, I cried for about 7 hours because I got a B+. And it was in driver's ed. And I went and open the door, and my heart stopped when I realized that he had a stick shift car. And if you could tell from the B+, I hadn't really mastered automatics at that point. So I had to get the change jar. Now, he had a gigantic change jar in a glass cranberry face thing, whatever they are, and it weighed a good 20 pounds. So I take it to the front, and I go back in the door, and it was locked. I'm like, seriously? So I started knocking on the door, and a teenage employee of the Olive Garden, a couple years older than me, came out, and he said, we're closed, you can't come in. And I said, well, we need to pay you. And he said, sorry, it's 10:30, the doors are closed. And I showed him the jar, which I thought was pretty compelling evidence. Like, we need to pay. And he said, it's not policy, and slammed the door in my face. So I thought, okay, well, the principal will let me back in. So I crawled around with the wood chips and the manicured bushes, and I knocked on the door, and I tried to get his attention, and I started doing all these gestures like, come let me in. And he was pretty busy with the endless basket of breadsticks, and he didn't want to move. So he just went like this. I'm like, seriously? So I'm lugging this jar, and finally I snuck in with the cleaning lady. And she was really gracious, unlike a lot of people in this story. So I handed the jar to the principal, and the principal said, it took me 6 months to collect that change. And when he dumped it out, I realized why, because it was mostly pennies and nickels. And I said, do you think the waitress is going to be upset? And he said, nah, I have a good idea. Let's make it into a smiley face. So we sat there making this smiley face out of pennies and nickels, which, as you can imagine, took up the whole table because it was about $30. And the waitress came. It was the end of her shift. She wanted to go home. She looks down despondently. She didn't even know what to say. The principal, without skipping a beat, looked up and said, your tip is in the eyes. Then the next morning, when I was leaning over the toilet, racked with vomiting because of a horrible case of food poisoning, I looked down at what remained of the tour of Italy, and I thought, is he going to call me again?